Okay, great. Well, good morning. It's a pleasure being here today. I want to thank Document Genetics for inviting me. I also want to thank them for volunteering to translate in case any of you have any particular problems with my form of English. So they'll be very helpful. Just ask them any questions if you don't quite understand me.
It's infoRouter, not router.
That's true. I was told that many times yesterday. All right.
That's a joke.
What I'd like to do over the next few minutes is kind of give you a little bit of background about our organization, go through some of the key features of infoRouter, give you a feel for what our customer base looks like, and then talk about the future a little bit. Now, I know some of the people here are already using infoRouter, so you're familiar with it, but for those that aren't, infoRouter is a document management solution. Basically, it's a tool that allows organizations to manage their valuable documents. In terms of background, our company is called Active Innovations. It was formed as a subsidiary in the year 2000, but the real start of the story goes back to 1981 when our parent company was formed. It's called GRMS, and at that time, GRMS was bringing to the marketplace a MRP solution for discrete manufacturers. And at that time, it was a piece of software that ran on proprietary boxes that were made by companies like Honeywell, Digital, Prime. Many of those companies are no longer in existence anymore. And I started working with our organization back in 1986. So I've been with it as we continued to take advantage of new technology, moving our product from those proprietary systems into open environment with Unix and Windows, then moving it in and changing our user interface from that old green screen to a graphical user interface. And then about 10 years ago, we improved the product by making it run through a browser. And over those years, we learned some very important lessons. And the two key components of it are that we felt that to be successful in the marketplace, we had to offer a feature-rich solution, and we also had to back it up with a very good support group. And when Active Innovations was formed, that philosophy came into that organization at the same time. And I've been working under the Active Innovations Group since it was formed. Today we have offices in the United States and in Ankara, Turkey. But what we're most proud of has been our ability to develop a worldwide reseller network. We have resellers in Europe, Africa, Asia, Australia, both North and South America. And we're very pleased to have Document Genetics as our reseller here in the UK. I've been working with several of the individuals at Document Genetics for over 10 years, and I feel they're an outstanding organization, and we're very happy to be doing business with them. To get into a little bit about some of the key features inside of infoRouter, it is also a browser-based product, and we feel that brings some advantages. One of them being in terms of it's much easier to implement. All your users need to do is have a browser on their PC. Most of the time your users are already familiar with working with inside of browsers. And then it gives your organization a great deal of flexibility in terms of access. I mean, it's certainly large companies that have multiple offices and plants around the world. The fact that they can access their data from any location is helpful. But even for smaller companies, it can be very nice in that you might have some technical people or engineers that need to go out and visit the customers. And even when they're on site there at the customers, they might need to go back and look up some technical information. So the idea behind it is that as long as the user can get to the internet, can get to the location in which you've installed infoRouter. It doesn't matter whether they're working in the office or if they have to do some catch-up work on the weekend and they want to work from home. Once you set up a system that allows a very flexible accessing capability, you need to have a nice umbrella in terms of security. And that security concept has to be easy to manage, but have the flexibility in place so that as exceptions occur, it can handle it. So like the way infoRouter is designed, when you create a top-level folder that we refer to as a library, you basically define what type of access and who is going to get access to the system in that particular folder. And you can do that by naming specific people or by using user groups. And what's nice about it is that once you define that, you don't have to touch it again unless you're dealing with an exception. So that as the users add subfolders, as they put documents into the system, those documents will automatically follow the security setup that you've established. And the only time you have to change anything would be, let's say you're putting a sensitive document into that particular folder, and you really don't want the usual group of people to have access to it. So you can just go into that particular document, or you could even do it at the folder level, and you can say, just for this case, just for this folder, I want to go in there and restrict it. And when we're at the document level, we can even identify where some people have different roles that they can play. You might give most of the people that are going to be looking at the document only read privileges, so they wouldn't be able to change it. And other people, you might give the ability to update the document as it's required. So those concepts are all in place inside of inside of infoRouter. And as we move on to the user itself, when the user goes to sign into infoRouter, infoRouter can work with your Active Directory. So we can authenticate the user either through your Active Directory or through our own internal system inside of infoRouter. And you have the option to do it in a mixed mode type of thing. Several of our customers use infoRouter to improve their communications with their clients. So what will happen in many cases is that for their employees, they'll have the authentication taking place against Active Directory, but for their outside clients, they'll just use infoRouter to authenticate that it's a viable person. And again, the purpose for me today is not to get into too much detail, but we have things in place called library managers and library policies that allow you to take the burden off of the system administrator so that that person or that role does not become a bottleneck area in your organization, and spread some of those permissions to people that you can call library managers and set up different library type of policies. Once the user logs into infoRouter, they'll be taken to a portal. And within infoRouter, you can have as many portals as you require. So if you want everyone in your company to work from the same portal, that's fine. If you want to have a portal for each department, engineering gets theirs, accounting gets theirs, you can do that. As I mentioned a moment ago, if you're having customers, you might want to have a customer have their own portal, so it has a nice personalized welcoming message to that customer as they come into it. And the idea of that portal is to make it an efficient starting place for the user, because on that portal can be links directly to documents that they're using over again. The user can set up favorites that will appear. They can be links to other websites that the user might have to go to during the course of the day. And the whole idea is to give the person, the user, a very simple starting point, but that has some functionality behind it to do their daily activities efficiently. Once the user gets into the system, and now I'll kind of start to talk a little bit more about the documents themselves. And one of the first things that you'll notice about infoRouter is that it can, or it will maintain a complete history of your documents. So as different updates get published, infoRouter will keep the history of the older versions. It'll keep track of who the people were that published that particular version, when it was created, and there's all sorts of audit trails that infoRouter keeps, but we can even tell you what version the individual users read. So there's a whole history of what's taken place with that document, as well as who's actually looked at that document. I don't know how it is here in the UK, but in the United States, businesses are getting more and more regulations placed upon them. And one of those major items is the retention of important documents. And it can be very confusing at times as to how long you need to retain this information. With infoRouter, we make that task a lot simpler. You can build your own retention schedules. You can have as many different ones as you want. You can have some set up for 3 years, 5 years, 7 years. You can say that after that 3-year period, I want to move the document into an archive folder and just leave it there. Or you can even go a step further and say, at the end of that 3-year archive period, I want the system to get rid of it. I don't need it anymore. So, and you can do that either at the document level, or you could set the policy at the folder level. So like, say maybe you set up a folder for tax documents, and you put a tax document in there. Since you've set the policy at the folder level, when that document gets entered, it'll follow that policy that you've set it up to be, and help you maintain that information for as long as either you need it or the law requires. Once you get the documents into the system, you want a nice, easy way to find those documents. So besides using wildcards and searching on names and things like that, infoRouter comes with a whole group of standard fields like descriptions and keywords and ownership and things like that that you can use to help find that document. We can even do searches within the content of the document to help you find that. And one of the bonuses I feel that we provide is, you know, day one, infoRouter comes with all these standard fields. But if your organization has some unique fields that we haven't thought of, there's a tool that we call Custom Properties that allows you to create your own extra metadata. And what's nice about it is you can define those fields, fill the information associated to the document, and our searching tool will automatically expand so that down the road when you need to go find that document by one of those pieces of information, you can do so. When I sit in on a lot of demonstrations and things of that nature, one area that usually creates a lot of interest is the workflow area, where you want to electronically route the document through your organization, maybe for approval purposes or something like that. And we offer a very flexible tool inside of infoRouter that can do that. With infoRouter, you can have as many workflow scenarios as you want. Each workflow can have as many steps that are needed, so that means you can route it through as many people or departments that you require. And within a step, you can even have parallel operations can be performed. When you build these workflows, you can put in some estimates as to how much time it should take for people to review those particular tasks and accomplish them. infoRouter will keep track of when that task started, and if it's about to be, if it hasn't been completed yet, it can send out reminder messages. And if it's about to become late, we can even send a message to a supervisor that you've defined, letting him or her know that you're having a problem with this particular task. And then there are options inside of infoRouter where the supervisor might want to now assign the task to someone else, give the task more time, or do things of that nature. And that kind of leads into the last bullet up on the screen with the email alert and change notifications. The way we let people know that they have activities to perform is infoRouter will send them out an email when a certain event occurs. So when the workflow gets assigned, infoRouter will look at the person or persons that are part of step one and send them all out an email letting them now know they have a task to perform. If in a few days or whatever the time period you set up to review it, if the task's not complete, the person will get another email. And then, as I mentioned, if it's going to run late, the supervisor will get an email. There's all sorts of other events that can trigger infoRouter to remind you to do something. We have many manufacturing companies that use infoRouter, and to maintain their ISO 9000 qualification, not only do they have to get qualified, but there's a policy that you have to continually be reviewing your procedures. And you can keep your procedures inside of infoRouter, and using one of our task capabilities, you could say, all right, as part of my criteria, every 6 months, every year, I need to review my receiving and inspection policy. So you can go into infoRouter, assign a task that says, okay, I'm going to tell Ed a year from now that send him an email letting him know that he now needs to go back and review that policy again and make sure you're still conforming to that. There are other things where we have a subscription capability where, let's say you're keeping a price catalog inside of infoRouter. When that price catalog gets updated, infoRouter could look at a subscription list and immediately send an email to all your salespeople letting them know that there's a new catalog out there for them. And we can also do things for like account managers or projects if you're using infoRouter for that, where you might set up a folder for a particular customer account. And if someone else in your organization creates a document, maybe a technical person creates a document and puts it in that customer's folder, the account manager can be notified saying that this new document's been added to that customer's folder. Okay. So the idea is we're trying to give you tools to help you manage your documents as things progress in your organization. Okay. infoRouter has a multi-language capability, so that if you install infoRouter and you have an office here in the UK and maybe an office in, say, Mexico, the people in the UK can work in English, the people in Mexico can work in Spanish. Everything I've talked about so far are activities that are done through the browser. But as we've learned through an organization, feedback from our customers, sometimes there are things that might work better outside the browser. And the next idea of the Web Services API is, of course, one of them. You might have situations where you want infoRouter to work hand in hand with some other third-party application that you might have. Maybe you have an accounting package that creates invoices. You would like infoRouter to pick up those invoices and automatically put them into the appropriate folders inside of infoRouter. Using this Web Services API capability, we can go in either direction. So we can be picking things up from one package, and then if you have another package that requires information from infoRouter, you can request it where we can give you, we could execute a search, find the documents that are appropriate based upon what that third-party package is looking for, and pass them back the appropriate information. We have a feature that ends up being used quite a bit that's called hot folders. It's fairly similar to the Web Services API, but it's a standard product. And what that allows you to do is you can tell infoRouter to run a service in the background where it will monitor folders that are on your file system. And when a document gets placed in that folder, it can automatically pick it up and put it into the appropriate folder inside of infoRouter. And it's used quite a bit with like scan documents, where you might already have a scanning package. You can have that scanning package set up, place documents out on your file system, and then every 5 minutes or 10 minutes or whatever time interval you set up, infoRouter can come behind the scenes, pick those scanned documents up and bring them into infoRouter. And if you're scanning the documents with an OCR product that we have an interface with, we can not only pick up the image, but we can pick up all that metadata along with it and fill in the appropriate fields inside of infoRouter. The last area in terms of like an add-in that works outside of infoRouter that I'd like to talk to you about is Office products. So for things like Word and Excel and PowerPoint and Outlook, you can actually be working in those products and be putting information into infoRouter. So if I'm in Outlook and someone sent me a very important email with an attachment, while I'm in Outlook, I could say, okay, send this along with its attachment, the email and the attachments, into infoRouter and choose what folder in infoRouter you would like it to be. Another example might be, let's say there's already a document, a Word document in infoRouter, but it's time to update it. So I could open up Word, ask Word to go get this document. I could do the updates, change the document, and then when I give it back to infoRouter, infoRouter will do all the other things that it would have done just like they were working through the browser. It'll create a new version for you, record who the user was that created the document, so all the functionality still stays in place, but the user is working right from Word. They don't have to go into a browser to do something like that. Okay. I thought I'd just spend a couple of moments to give you a feel for the customer base that we have. It's really quite diverse. I mean, we go anywhere from industry leaders to local government agencies, from 10-user systems to customers that have many thousand users using infoRouter. We go from simple configurations where everything's sitting on one server to more elaborate distributed processing where I have one server is running infoRouter, the database is sitting on a second server, and I have a couple of mass storage devices to handle my warehouse and documents. T-Mobile is probably our largest customer in terms of activity. They have over 15,000 users with us, and they have a distributed type of configurations. Some of the other larger ones are like Boeing Aerospace, Qualcomm, Lockheed Martin. It was one of our original customers that we had, and they had a very unique need in the beginning where, again, this is going back quite a few years, but when they put together some of these proposals that they would make to the Defense Department in the States, they were talking about quotes for sometimes billion-dollar projects. Did I do that?
No.
Sorry. They were doing, making bids on quotes that would be in the millions, sometimes billion-dollar type of projects, and their quotes could be several thousand pages long and be very technical. And before they started using infoRouter, they had a room that was probably about this size, maybe a little bit bigger, where they had whiteboards all around the room. They would fly their key engineers in from all different parts of the country. They'd come into this room here, and they would lay out all the sections of the quote as to what was going to take place and assign who was going to have those type of tasks. And then the engineer would go back and do their task, and sometimes they'd have to come back into the conference room because some things had changed. So it was a very expensive proposition for them to even get a bid to the U.S. government. Once they started using infoRouter, they didn't have that travel expense anymore because they could set up their as they would do with their wallboard and had the different sections up on the whiteboard. They then used folders inside of infoRouter for the different sections. And using security, they assigned which engineers were going to be doing what sections of the proposal. They had their deadlines to meet, and it just made the whole process much more efficient. And what helped them was that on the next time they did a bid that was fairly similar in terms of one of their previous ones, using the searching tool, taking sections of the projects they've already bid on and saved, it just made the next proposal that much easier for them to do. Okay. And what I'll do is just spend a minute or two to talk about what's coming down the road with infoRouter. As I mentioned, I've found that usually the workflow most organizations have interest in. So we're going to continue to enhance that. I know what Jez is going to talk about in a few minutes. In our latest release, it gave us the ability with workflow to set it up so that as a step begins, you could actually have infoRouter automatically move the document to a different folder if you wanted to, or at the completion of the workflow, have the document moved. We're going to kind of take that concept and add the capability to call a subroutine, where maybe at the end of the workflow process, let's say you were approving an invoice. It goes through the different people that have to sign off the invoice in the organization. If the last step is that everything's approved, we might have a little subroutine at that point that then passes the appropriate information to your accounting package so that it can pick it up and automatically create that accounts payable invoice on the system for you. So as I mentioned, we're going to continue to do things like that, add enhancements. In terms of security, we're even going to make that a little bit more flexible. In the beginning, when I was talking about security, I said that when you create the library, you can, using user groups and usernames, indicate who's going to have access. And that's relatively simple, but let's say you were going to have a dozen or more libraries in the organization, and 6 of them are all going to have the same security concept. So what we're going to do is give you the ability to set up a security profile, and then when you create that new library, instead of having to repick the same users and the same user groups over and over again, you can just say, okay, I'm going to use this security profile on this particular library. Just makes it a little bit easier. We're also going to create a tool that will allow you to export the content of infoRouter, the key pieces of information, not only the custom properties but the standard fields inside of infoRouter, to an Excel document, which then gives you the flexibility to do any type of maybe reporting, sorting, anything like that you might want to do on that type of information. Over the last few releases, we've enhanced the user friendliness of using infoRouter on tablets. We're going to continue to do so, and we're even at the early stages of making an application for the iPad. We figure that way it'll give us a little bit more integration with that. So that's on the agenda to do that. In the near future, we're going to start to take advantage of Microsoft's indexing service, Microsoft Search Service support, which is their new searching tool. So we're going to take advantage of that and incorporate that into infoRouter. And then we're also going to expand into the social media field. What we've learned by doing the installations and stuff like that is that many people prefer to learn through videos as opposed to through documentation. So we're creating a whole series of training videos that we're going to put up on YouTube that the user can call up and use whenever they want to, either at the very beginning have some training, and or maybe they might be using infoRouter for many years, but they've not used a particular feature and they're curious about using it. So they'll have those training exercises, videos at their disposal to take a look at. And the other thing that we've learned over the years is that when you become a customer, we usually get 1 or 2 contact names, so that when we have announcements as to new enhancements in infoRouter, those are the people that get those types of messages currently. And what we've kind of found is that most companies say, well, look, you know who you should really be sending these messages to are the IT people, but they're not the users. So the user sometimes doesn't find out till many months down the road that there's a new feature inside of infoRouter. So we're going to use things like Facebook and Twitter to help us get to the user group a little bit more directly for things that those type of announcements, and also for any type of polling or anything that we might try to do a survey sometimes in terms of figuring out what areas of functionality are where we should be heading to as a company. All right. I know in a moment I'm going to turn this over to Jez, but I want to thank you very much for your time today. I hope you found it was helpful. I'll be here throughout the whole day. If you have any questions, please don't hesitate to ask. I know after Jez does his session, we'll kind of try to answer your questions together. And I was asked to mention, I think when you sat down today, you saw this little ticket. As a thank you for attending today's session, we're offering you a 2-for-1 on additional user licenses if you'd like to, if your organization needs to increase the number of users into infoRouter. But again, thank you very much, and I'll turn it over to Jez.